Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Ange Kirikoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my hidden gems for Week 4 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Now, of course, if you watched the Thursday night football game, you witnessed the snap occur on live television as we witnessed the entire Jacksonville Jaguars defense disappear in that second half. But what we came to realize in the coming days was that many other fantasy prospects that have played pivotal roles in our lineups have begun to disappear due to injuries. Now, of course, we're not going to panic. And what we're going to do is look across the entire fantasy football universe in order to reconstruct our lineups and set ourselves up for success in Week 4. We're going to be collecting the 6 hidden gems of this upcoming week throughout different timelines, different planets, and on different teams at different positions in order to make sure that we can win in Week 4 to get us closer to that goal of winning a 2021 fantasy football championship. So we'll talk about players, 6 of them exactly, that are currently being started in less than 30% of leagues. Again, a crazy number, and hopefully are available in your leagues. Now, who else to help us do that than Underdog Fantasy, a superhero in their own right. Now, for those of you who are wondering what Underdog Fantasy is, well, in my opinion, it's a way to get your Sundays back. For those of you who are dealing with a boatload of injuries or players that are not producing up to par, whether it is dealing with guys like T. Higgins being out, Chase Claypool being out, Rob Gronkowski being out, Raheem Mostert having an early injury, or even guys like Elijah Mitchell, who you picked up to be an automatic play week in and week out dealing with injuries, and maybe even players like Robert Woods or Ryan Tannehill that haven't put up the numbers that we've seen in years past. You may be struggling and your Sundays may not be fun anymore. If you want to bring fun back into your Sundays, Underdog Fantasy is the way to do that. With their user-friendly app and website, you can draft the players that you want today for your Battle Royale contests, for your Pick'em slips. Again, there are different ways to play and have fun and going after players, again, that you want. Maybe you didn't get a share of Cooper Kupp or Mike Williams this offseason for your season-long league, but you can have them on your roster and have them help you win this upcoming weekend. If you sign up right now using promo code Andrew, you'll get $10 of free bonus cash with any first deposit of $10 or more. Again, there's never too much fantasy football, especially when all of us are suffering all offseason. Let's go ahead and make the most of every single opportunity we can to get more exposure to fantasy football. And of course, quick and easy. Let's start playing fantasy today the Underdog way. Besides talking about the 6 hidden gems, as we continue through today's episode, we'll talk about some pick'em slips for this upcoming weekend's contest. Guys that I honestly think are going to outproduce majority of the statistics that they have in line for the props. We'll go ahead and talk about that. But of course, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support, helping us surpass 52,000 subscribers. Again, I mean, your guys' support continues to give me opportunities left, right, and center and helps this channel grow and improve it every single day that I possibly can, putting in all of my efforts and with very limited sleep. But again, I cannot thank you guys enough. For those of you who have not yet already subscribed to the channel, we're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2021 season. For those of you who are interested in these kind of videos, of course, hidden gems, weekly rankings, Sunday morning live streams. Do not forget 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be live streaming tomorrow morning, making sure that your lineups are ready to go for Week 4 of the 2021 fantasy football season. We have timestamps down below in the description of the video. And don't forget to smash the like button down below and comment and let me know what you guys think of today's 6 hidden gems, players that, again, are only being started in less than 30% of leagues. Let me know what you guys think and what other players could potentially be hidden gems this upcoming week. All right, we're talking about 6 hidden gems across the fantasy football universe. We're going to begin with Zack Moss of the Buffalo Bills. I think Zack Moss has a lot of potential going into this upcoming week. He's currently only being started in 30% of Yahoo leagues as it stands. And right now, you know, Zack Moss is the number 22 overall running back in a half PPR scoring format, and he's only played 2 games. He missed the entirety of week 1, and in the past 2 weeks has found a lot of success in fantasy, of course, scoring touchdowns and being a consistent producer. Of course, in week 1, 14.4 points, in week 2, 16.6 points. Overall, has found consistent success, and as the weeks have progressed and gone on, his opportunity in terms of snap share has moved forward, and so has his rushing attempts. I mean, just this last week, had himself 13 rushing attempts for 60 yards, 3 catches, 3 targets, 31 receiving yards, and a touchdown. In week 2 of the 2021 fantasy football season, the first week that he played 27.7% of the snaps, and it completely doubled the following week with 55.7% in week 3. And there's a lot of potential for Zack Moss going into week 4 of the 2021 fantasy football season, especially considering they're playing against the Houston Texans. And like I always say it, the hardest choices require the strongest of wills. And in this specific scenario, I think it is going to be tough for many of you to start Zack Moss because maybe you already have a solid flex start. But for those of you who don't, and you're looking for a person to play in that flex position and find a lot of success, I think this is the way to go about it, playing Zack Moss as this week's Power Stone, a hidden gem that in many circumstances wasn't looked at as a viable option, especially after week 1, in which he was pretty much a healthy and active. We go into week 4 now. They play against the Houston Texans, one of the defenses that give up the most points to the opposing running back position. And on top of that, it's supposed to be a rain game. Based on the weather reports, it is going to be raining throughout this entire game in Buffalo. And why not go ahead and run the ball when it continues to rain? And that's what I expect to see from the Buffalo Bills as they maintain a solidified lead over the Houston Texans and use Zack Moss for a majority of that second half to continue to pound the rock, find success, and find you some more fantasy points. That is why we have Zack Moss as this week's Power Stone. We'll go ahead and move on and begin talking about the Space Stone. Antonio Brown is a very interesting prospect. Obviously, he did not play in week 3. And this upcoming week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Foxborough to take on the New England Patriots. Of course, a little bit of a revenge game for Tom Brady. The reason why I believe Antonio Brown, besides the fact that he's only being started in 22% of leagues as it currently stands, the reason why I think he is a great play is because there isn't going to be a Rob Gronkowski out there. And what we know about Bill Belichick is that he shuts down opposing tight ends. So whether it is Cameron Brate or O.J. Howard, there's a reason why the New England Patriots have allowed the fewest amount of points to opposing tight ends. So where is Tom Brady going to go with the ball? He's probably going to have to throw it to his, obviously accomplished wide receivers. With Giovanni Bernard dealing with an injury, we have ourselves Evans, Godwin, and of course Antonio Brown, who in my opinion is the X factor of this offense. I mean, going back to week 1, we saw him absolutely explode. 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown for 21.2 fantasy points. And when we look at this offense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what they're most likely going to do, it's probably pass the ball. I mean, there's a reason why Tom Brady has passed the ball 141 times already thus far this season in 3 games. Tom Brady also leads the entire National Football League in total passing touchdowns with 10. This is a pass-first offense, and they're not going to stop, especially considering Tom Brady needs to exact some revenge and, of course, get Antonio Brown more involved in this offense. When we look at, of course, the strength of schedule against the New England Patriots secondary, yeah, they have a pretty solid secondary, but we've seen other wide receivers find success against this defense even recently. Callaway last week, 4 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown. Waddle in week 1, 4 catches, 61 and a touchdown. Braxton Berrios in week 2, 7 catches for 73. There's a lot of exposure for opportunity this upcoming week for the wide receivers of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, with Tom Brady continuing to air it out, he's going to find success with Antonio Brown. That is our Space Stone for this upcoming week because Antonio Brown to the moon, literally. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next hidden gem. It is Corey Davis of the New York Jets. And he's currently the reality stone because the reality of the situation is that the wide receiver core for the New York Jets is pretty much completely decimated, like Xandar once was when Thanos collected the Power Stone. But that's besides the point. When we're talking about the Ether and the Reality Stone, we're talking about the other receiving options in this offense. The tight end position doesn't really contribute much. The running back position doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield that often. And the wide receiver position, Elijah Moore dealing with a concussion. Jeff Smith injured. Keelan Cole not really getting much utilization. Denzel Mims, hasn't caught a ball in the last 2 weeks. Jamison Crowder has always been dealing with injury. Braxton Berrios is extremely inconsistent. But who has been continuously getting targets and been the number 1 wide receiver for this offense? None other than Corey Davis, a guy that's currently only being started in 26% of leagues today. Yes, he may be coming off of 2 lackluster performances, but they did play against very difficult secondaries that, of course, pushed Zach Wilson to the limit. Of course, Zach Wilson's interception ratio will speak volumes, but when you're playing against Denver and you're playing against New England, a rookie quarterback is going to struggle in those circumstances when the pressure's coming. But this upcoming week, when they play against the Tennessee Titans, again, a revenge game for Corey Davis. They didn't want to re-sign him. They went ahead and went after Julio, and Corey Davis found a new home with the New York Jets. I think it's just pure poetry that A.J. Brown and Julio Jones seem to be out this upcoming week while Corey Davis comes into town to dominate the wide receiver position, but for the opposite team that's giving up the 3rd most points to opposing wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins in week 1, 6 catches, 83 and a touchdown. Christian Kirk in that same game, 5 catches, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett, 8 catches, 178 and a touchdown, while Swain as well in that same game, 95 yards and a touchdown on 5 catches. My goodness, has this secondary given up points? I absolutely expect Corey Davis to succeed, as the reality of the situation lends him a a lot of potential upside this upcoming week. And specifically on the Underdog Fantasy Pick'ems, 53.5 yards, that's an overplay, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video. We continue on with our next hidden gem. We have J.J. Taylor as the time stone. We all know what the time stone pretty much stands for. Dread it, run from it. Destiny arrives, all the same. And I think over time, with the injury and the injured reserve stint that James White is going to face, whether it is season ending or not, we're going to see J.J. Taylor get a lot of opportunity in this backfield because this offense requires a James White player. I mean, even when James White was missing from the lineup last year, Rex Burkhead filled in perfectly and had himself incredible games in which he had a lot of targets and in fantasy was a reliable prospect. Now, when I look at what J.J. Taylor has done in his career, I mean, he just came into the league in 2020. He has very little experience, but in the games that we've seen him play, specifically in the preseason, because he hasn't been given many reps, considering James White's obvious presence in this lineup, we've seen him be a huge pass-catching threat. Specifically, if you go back to the 2020 preseason, he had played one game in which he had 10 targets, 10 receptions for 62 receiving yards. This offseason, in the 2021 preseason, had himself 3 games. In those games, 5 catches, 5 targets, 31 yards. 3 targets, 3 catches, 18 yards. 2 targets, 2 catches, 13 yards. Thus far in his career, throughout the preseason, has caught 100% of the passes that he has been thrown to him. And as long as Mac Jones is going to continue to try to check it down, and this offense is going to be in a situation in which they're obviously going to have to pass for majority of the year, considering, again, their offense hasn't been potent and they're going to have to come back in majority of the games. I think J.J. Taylor going forward, not specifically this week as a start, but going forward should be a guy that should be looked into. Again, is only rostered in 2% of leagues and is being started in 0% of leagues. I think that 0 number should stay consistent, but I think he should be rostered if, in fact, you have the opportunity to, of course, pick him up and put him there and hope for the best for the time stone. We move on to our next hidden gem. It is Kenny Golladay of the New York Giants. Kenny Golladay is the stealth stone, and what did it cost? And the answer is everything. Unfortunately, this upcoming week, Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton will be out with hamstring injuries. Both of them who have contributed heavily in this offense. In fact, in weeks 1 and 2 of the 2021 fantasy football season, those 2 wide receivers, Shepard and Slayton, were targeted a total of 32 times. So 16 times per game. So there's 16 targets of opportunity up for grabs in this offense. And who other than Kenny Golladay to go ahead and take advantage of it? Currently being started in 26% of leagues. He's coming off a week in which he had 4 catches on 5 targets for 64 yards. 8.4 fantasy points isn't the greatest thing, especially against an Atlanta Falcons secondary. But in my opinion, there's a lot of opportunity for success this upcoming week playing against the New Orleans Saints. DJ Moore, 8 catches, 79 and a touchdown. Kendrick Bourne, 6 catches, 96 and a touchdown. Jacoby Myers in that same contest, 9 catches, 94. We've seen success from the wide receiver position just recently against this New Orleans Saints secondary. And I think of all the receiving options on this team, are we going to expect Evan Ingram to just be an automatic success? No. Are we going to expect Colin Johnson to come out of nowhere and be that guy? No. It's going to be up to Kenny Golladay, a guy that made a huge splash in free agency with a huge contract and needs to go ahead and once again prove himself as a great option. I think this is the week as, of course, the sacrifice has been made and Kenny Golladay solidifies himself as the soul stone. We move on to our final hidden gem for this upcoming week. We have Curtis Samuel of the Washington football team. And cursed with knowledge, I've gone ahead and seen that the potential of Curtis Samuel is immense. And there's a reason why a lot of people drafted him this offseason and have kind of rostered him in their injured reserve spot as he's been dealing with that a little bit of a stint on IR with the groin injury. I think there's a lot of potential for Curtis Samuel with the Washington football team. With the way that Taylor Heineke's been playing, of course, distributing the ball, whether it be to Logan Thomas, to J.D. McKissick, to Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel fits perfectly into this offense, and there's a reason why they wanted to go out and make a splash in free agency and bring in a Curtis Samuel. Of course, not only being a former teammate of Terry McLaurin at Ohio State, but also being another speedster wide receiver that can make immediate impact. This upcoming week, he's currently being only started in 1% of leagues. He's currently rostered in 39%, so be that as it may, you may have him available in your league. But just throwing it out there, he plays against the Atlanta Falcons. He's had a lot of experience against the Atlanta Falcons in his career, especially considering he played for Carolina, the NFC South. Last season against the NFC South, specifically the Atlanta Falcons, the 2 contests. One of them, he had 4 catches, 31 yards and a touchdown, 23 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in that game for 19.4 fantasy points. And in the other contest, 5 catches, 36 yards, 4 rushing attempts for 28 yards, and 8.9 total fantasy points. Whether it is on the ground or through the air, he's a dynamic player and he's going to make immediate impact in this Washington football team offense. On top of it, last season, amongst all wide receivers in the National Football League, Curtis Samuel had the highest catch rate of 79.38%. According to Next Gen Stats, there was only one other receiving option out there that had a higher catch rate, and it was Robert Tonyan with an 88% catch rate. But outside of that, Curtis Samuel led the league with a 79.38% catch rate. And that's an unbelievable number, as we'll continue to have to rely upon him going into a matchup in which he plays against the Atlanta Falcons, giving up the 11th most points to wide receivers. Of course, Devontae Smith in week 1 and Jalen Reagor both scored and both had over 49 receiving yards and over 6 receptions. We had Evans and Godwin in week 2. Both of them dominate. Of course, Evans with 2 receiving touchdowns, 75 yards. Godwin with 62 yards and a touchdown. There's a lot of potential for this defense to give up points in a potential shootout. I think that the knowledge that I've been cursed with leads me in the direction of suggesting Curtis Samuel as a guy that you should certainly be rostering before this weekend's games, but maybe if in fact you are in need of a wide receiver 3 or flex play in a deeper league, Curtis Samuel can definitely suffice and be fantasy relevant for this upcoming weekend. Now that we've gone ahead and established our 6 hidden gems for this upcoming week, I want to continue to find hidden gems, but now on Underdog Fantasy's site, in order to give ourselves an opportunity to win some money this upcoming weekend. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with their Pick'ems contest, it's extremely easy to understand and immediately can be one of the most fun contests you can participate in this upcoming weekend, as I pretty much am going to enjoy winning, and I'll explain to you why. If you go ahead and just look to the left of me, every designated player has a statistic that you have to pick over or under in regards to. Let's say, for example, Travis Kelce, 93.5 receiving yards. If you go ahead and believe that he's going to surpass that number, considering, like we've talked about already this week, 7 of his last 11 games, he has surpassed over 100 receiving yards. He has a great chance of surpassing 94 yards. So let's say, for example, we say over. If you go ahead and you pick 6 players and you go ahead and correctly predict their over-under, you can win 20 times your money. Now, to be safe, you can go ahead and not do it with 6 players, because maybe if in fact getting a 6-leg parlay in that sort of circumstance is extremely difficult. But if I feel like Daniel Jones is going to go under and maybe Goddard's going to go over, I could 6 times my money right now. Let's say I put $10 in, I can go ahead and flip that into 60 if I feel confident about the contest. Now, I want to go ahead and specifically give you guys some understanding as to what I am confident in this upcoming weekend for the Pick'ems lineups and the Pick'em slips that I've gone ahead and constructed. I'm going to go ahead and construct them right now for you. As I scroll down and I continue to look, there was another hidden gem that I had talked about earlier today that, in my opinion, absolutely should be taken advantage of this upcoming weekend. Corey Davis, 53.5 receiving yards. The reason why this number is so low is because in the last 2 weeks against the New England Patriots and, of course, the Denver Broncos, in terms of yardage, he hasn't been great. But if you go back to the Carolina Panthers game, he was absolutely feasting. This upcoming week, again, the 3rd easiest matchup at the wide receiver position, I absolutely think this is an over, something you should smash. Now that we've gone ahead and solidified one of our potential players, I want to get 2 more. And as I continue to kind of sift through this list, as there's so many different players and different props to continue to try to take advantage of, I wanted to go and I wanted to collect some guaranteed production. And who else to find guaranteed production than the little heart next to him, Davante Adams. I went ahead and hearted this a little bit earlier because I think Davante Adams is a fantastic play. He's been an absolute monster in this offense, and with Marquez Valdez-Scantling out this upcoming week, from very little, potential contributions from Robert Tonyan, of course, Alan Lazard, their potential options are here. I think Davante Adams is an automatic over, another one of these players that I want to grab and play. So now that we've collected 2 of these guys, we could potentially even go out and put in a potential, $10 and triple our money right here, right now. We don't even have to continue, but I feel like going for that 6 times will be extremely sweet, and that's exactly what we're going to go for here. As I continue to try to find a hidden gem in this list and go up and down, I found myself, yes, liking a couple players, but most certainly thinking that Odell Beckham Jr., 69.5 yards, that, in my opinion, is automatic success this upcoming weekend in a contest that should be a shootout, when Jarvis Landry is not in the game. And we haven't seen much utilization from the tight end position of the Cleveland Browns going back to last week. I mean, Odell Beckham's coming off a game, 77 receiving yards, 9 targets, 5 catches in his first game back in 2021. Again, it's going to take him a little while to find his legs, but I think 69.5 yards against the secondary that, of course, has given up a bunch of points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season. In fact, the Minnesota Vikings have given up 3 100-yard receiving games to wide receivers thus far, whether it was Jamar Chase in week 1, Rondale Moore in week 2, and, of course, DK Metcalf in week 3. I think OBJ is primed for a fantastic week, and that's where I'm going to leave my first pick'em slip. Go ahead and scroll back up to the top. I feel very confident with all 3 of these wide receivers balling out this upcoming week. And a 6 times payout, I think this is just an automatic play, and that's exactly what I'm going to do as I submit our first pick'em slip. All right, now that we've established our first slip, I wanted to go ahead and once again go back through this and give you guys a little bit more perspective as to some of the potential contests and or potential props that I really do like this upcoming week. Now, there are some that are extremely enticing, like an Adam Thielen over 5.5 receptions. Thus far this season has surpassed 6 receptions every single game. Jalen Waddle over 50.5 yards. He has pretty much gotten 48 plus yards every single game. He is on that kind of fringe area. But the thing that continued to pull me in my opinion, that I'm kind of looking towards and thinking probably is automatic success is Matt Ryan. And you may be thinking, really, Andrew, Matt Ryan? Again, we're talking about hidden gems here. 23.5 completions thus far this season, has surpassed that in the last 2 consecutive games as he continues to check down to his respective running backs. And you may be thinking, yes, this is an even easier matchup for him considering he plays the Washington football team. That's even better. There'll be more opportunity and more receptions for Kyle Pitts, for, of course, Calvin Ridley. But I do expect guys like Cordero Patterson and Mike Davis to get their receptions. If there was a reception potential prop here for Cordero Patterson over like a 5.5, I think I would have taken it. But for as of right now, I think 23.5 completions for Matt Ryan. That's something that I'm interested in a game that should be a relative shootout. Now, when I look at other options, speaking of receptions, I went ahead and I'm thinking, there's a very good chance that Chase Edmonds goes over 4.5 receptions. Let's think about the game script that we have on hand this upcoming week. You play against the Los Angeles Rams, a team that looks nearly unstoppable considering they tore apart that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And what did Tampa Bay have to do for the entirety of that game? They had to pass. I mean, Tom Brady led that team in rushing stats because nobody could really run the ball because they were down so many points. It was a matter of passing. And there's a reason why Giovanni Bernard got himself 9 receptions on 10 targets for 51 yards and a receiving touchdown. I think Chase Edmonds and the over on his 4.5 is something that I'm looking towards. Again, look at his receptions thus far this season, 4, 5, and 7. I mean, he's already on pace in a lot of these contests. And now that we think about the game script that we're going to see against the Los Angeles Rams, I'm ready for that. Though I looked around and found like, okay, maybe we're going to go after Jonathan Taylor. Maybe we're going to go after Brandon Ayuk. I found that, the number that was associated with Amari Cooper was a little too low this upcoming week. 63.5 receiving yards. I know in the last 2 weeks, he has been extremely underwhelming in terms of overall performance. But I think this is a week in which he blows over that number. And because it's so significantly lower than a lot of these other wide receiver options, especially at his caliber, I think this is one that I absolutely want to take against the defense like the Carolina Panthers that, in my opinion, isn't that great. I mean, we saw it early in week 1. 97 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns from a guy like Corey Davis. I know some of these other offenses haven't been able to produce, but I mean, we even saw Brandon Cooks last week go for over 100 receiving yards against this defense. I think Amari Cooper is another one of these plays that I want to go over on. That's exactly where we're going to go ahead and do it. The Matt Ryan one is the one that makes me nervous the most. But again, if I wanted to, and I feel confident about it, let's go, for example, and let's say I feel relatively confident that there's going to be an opportunity in which Corey Davis goes for over his 50 yards, and maybe even Devontae Adams goes over his 94 yards. So why go ahead and risk it when there isn't any incentive to risk it? Play the guys you want. That was the entire point. And if this 4-leg parlay comes to play, we get ourselves 10 times. We'll go ahead and submit this one. I feel pretty confident in it. And maybe we could have added that OBJ one to the end of this. Hey, you know what? Forget about it. Let's go ahead and let's go for it all. Let's add the OBJ one to the end of this. OBJ over. Listen, guys, I'm a relatively positive person. I expect a lot of people to play well. And though I went over, you could go ahead and go for, fading players and thinking they're not going to produce the yardage counts, etc. But for now, I'm pretty confident with this, and we'll submit this lineup. and confirm it there. Now, the last thing that I wanted to participate in terms of pick'ems is the rivals contests. Now, they pin two players against each other, and you have to go ahead and pick who is going to contribute the most in that given statistic. For example, Kirk Cousins versus Baker Mayfield in total completions. I'll take Kirk Cousins in this scenario in terms of what he has done in terms of total completions already thus far this season. In the shootouts that they participate in, he throws the ball heavily. And in comparison to the Cleveland Browns, an offense that is a very run-first overall scheme, and they've never really had to expand outside of throwing the ball, they're giving Baker Mayfield an extra advantage of 4 completions. I think based on what Kirk Cousins has already been able to obviously prove this season, he very easily, with the 4 overall completion handicap, get himself a victory in this specific circumstance. The next one-on-one rivals matchup I wanted to cover is Zeke versus Hubbard. I mean, to be honest, in terms of total rushing yards, we're looking at what Zeke has been able to accomplish. Obviously, Hubbard looked good against the Houston Texans run-stop defense, but this is another Texas team that has been great against opposing running backs thus far this season. And I think Hubbard, yes, he will be given the opportunity to run the ball, but in this contest, when they're in a situation where they have to continually, of course, pass the ball in order to keep up with the Dallas Cowboys, because I truly think they are no joke overall as a team, I think Elliott is a great play here in the one-on-one matchup. And when we continue to look to try to find our final one-on-one rivals matchup, I find a lot of confidence going with Cooper Kupp against a plus 14.5 DeAndre Hopkins. Cooper Kupp has been a monster this season, and I don't think he's slowing down. Of course, we have a guy like DeAndre Hopkins that is still returning from a rib injury. In terms of total yardage, it's going to be tough for him to pretty much take on a guy like Jalen Ramsey for the majority of this game, and on top of it, be able to beat Cooper Kupp, who, as of thus far this season, 96 yards, 163 yards, and 108 yards. Of course, this last week against Tampa Bay, didn't have his biggest overall yardage game, but in terms of targets, receptions, touchdowns, he's in that category, and I think he's going to continue to expand that yardage count this upcoming week. We'll go ahead, put these 3 together, send that in. Just giving you another perspective as to how to play fantasy football, of course, with Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code Andrew today and get $10 bonus cash with your first deposit of $10 or more on UnderdogFantasy.com. Link down in the description, promo code down in the description for those of you who are interested. Again, thank you everybody for watching. We've obviously gone ahead and talked about hidden gems. We've obviously gone ahead and talked about some pick'ems. Let's go ahead and submit this, and we'll see how this continues to go next week. Let's move back into here comes the football. Don't worry about it. The hidden gems for week 4 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Of course, we have a lot of players and a lot of opportunity for success this upcoming week. Let's not forget, we talked about Antonio Brown, Curtis Samuel, J.J. Taylor, Kenny Golladay, Zack Moss, and of course, Corey Davis. Do not forget that 53.5 yards is great. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. I do appreciate you guys' continued support. And until tomorrow, of course, Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kick off with Kirchhoff. I'll see you guys. Peace.